You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Stand by for high-octane, action-packed drama in the courtroom. Let's see if this tribunal can do Warp 9. It's 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, and you're with us, and it must be time for Mission Log Live. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Heather Barker. Tonight on Mission Log Live, it's time for more stories of Pike and his crew with Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 2 at Astra Per Aspera. If you would like to be a part of our live discussion, you know what to do, but just in case you're new to Mission Log Live or need a reminder, just click on the Zoom link or give us a ring by using the one tap from your smartphone, or you can call us 669-900-6833 and enter the meeting code and password you see in the show notes. And the Earl Green of the Earl Green Room will get you settled right in.
You know, there's a lot of shows that have a green room, but not every show has an Earl Green or an Earl Green room. That's what makes us special. Yeah.
They are not as lucky.
And apparently so much of the action happens in the Earl Green room. So I feel like you and I miss out a bit on that. Yeah. By the way, it's so good to be here with you. Finally, continuing the Mission Log tradition of welcoming our guest host back for each new Trek series. And since you've really taken it and run with it, I want you to tell us a little later about what you're doing on Strange New Worlds chats live in our Discord. Maybe we'll do that at the bottom of the hour when we talk about Patreon.
That sounds perfect.
Good plan? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. We'll do that. And in the meantime, before we get the show going, let's say hi to some of the folks in the chat. I get a little awkward for me. I'm looking at it on a phone. I imagine you're probably looking at it on your computer. So if I miss people, let me know. Let's see. There's Stefan. There's Paul. I believe we'll have another Paul in there in a moment. Let's see here. There is Jane. Good to see you, Jane. Always a great contributor in our weekly live chats on Discord. Scott Palm, good to see you, Scott. There's our other Paul. There's Paul T. And let's see. There's you. So you are simultaneously here and there.
I am.
Yes. There's Dave. Probably have another Dave in a moment. There's Alan. There's Willie McCauley. Hello, Mr. Willie. There's Dom. There's Matt. Who else? Oh my God, 3 Pauls. We got a Paul Fecta. That's so awesome to see. So welcome, everybody. Glad to have you with us.
I see a very important Lieutenant J in there.
Lieutenant J. Oh, Tracy, my friend. Good to see you. And there's Karen, by the way, and there's Mary Moore Bauer. And oh my gosh, Carlos, and everybody's coming to hang out with us tonight. I love
all
that.
The best. All the best.
Yeah. So before we get into the recap and so much good stuff to discuss on this week's episode. Before we get to that, let's talk about the news in Mission Log Land. Top of the news, we are all bummed about the cancellation and the odd bouncing of Prodigy from the Paramount Plus schedule. Now, your Mission Log Prodigy host, Norm Shar, and special guest, Earl, will get together this week to record a special episode to address all the news, the frustration, and our hope for the future. That episode will drop next Tuesday, so stay tuned at podcast.roddenberry.com and click on the Mission Log Prodigy link there. Oh, and while you're at it, follow us on @ML-Prodigy on Twitter, because you'll be able to get the news there too. Now, as we normally do, our coverage of Voyager continues this Thursday with Worst Case Scenario, the one where Tuvok plays holonovel author and cooks up the worst case scenario until Seska makes it worse-er. And Heather, please let our guests know what is happening elsewhere in our Mission Log programming, if you would.
Well, over on Mission Log The Orville, we're currently covering the Orville graphic novels by David A. Goodman, which are set between seasons 2 and 3. Our friends Mike and Jessica Lynn are doing that. An amazing job and very interesting and fun stories. So I think everybody should give those a read and a listen to the podcast.
I'll second that for sure. And where might people find those and other great shows?
Let me tell you where, John.
Thank you.
These shows and more are available at podcast.roddenberry.com, and all can be enjoyed on YouTube as well. That address is www.youtube.com/Roddenberry Entertainment. There you go.
Perfect. Love it. And by the way, Jesse, even before, because I'm about to do the recap, I'm just like, I'm ready to do the recap. And Mr. Willie in the chat says, Ad Astra, probably the best Trek I've seen in years. Years. You hear that?
Yeah. I hear that. Look, I love all of Trek.
Yes.
So I don't want to say like this is the best compared to anything.
Right.
But it's really funny because I was just saying in one of our Discord chats the other day how I've been waiting for the speech episode, right? I want one of those good meaty speeches, and I got a whole episode.
Yeah, you did.
It blew me away. I'm so excited to hear what everyone has to say about it. So I think you should jump into this recap, which looks extremely long and very good.
It gives us plenty of time for our listeners to call in with their meaty opinions on this meaty episode. Okay, so if you will indulge me, here we go. Ad Astra, Ad Aspera, Per Aspera, not Ad Aspera. Una is still in space jail, which means Pike needs to go find a space lawyer. And he finds one on the inhospitable world inhabited by the Illyrians in the Volterra Nebula. Only this space lawyer knows Una and knows the case, and she's not interested. Mostly because she sees the underlying prejudice in the situation and doesn't want to stoop to defending Illyrians in front of a Starfleet that wouldn't have them. Also, she knows Una, and they had a falling out. But Pike is so persuasive. He's extending a personal olive branch, and he really wants to save his friend from dishonorable discharge. Plus, the space lawyer, Nira, could use this opportunity to boost her own career and take on the very institution that she holds in some level of disdain, much like how she feels about Una. So, Nira shows up to a chilly reception from Una, but they get right to the point. Una served Starfleet well, but they found out that she was Illyrian and thus genetically modified, and they wanted to kick her out. That was her passion, her life. By Una rejecting the plea deal and by Nira challenging Starfleet, Captain Battelle reapproaches Starfleet with an amended charge. Now it's about submitting false documents along with the bioengineering and sedition for good measure. She's seeking to toss Una in space jail for about 20 years. And that's all before the opening credits. With Starfleet throwing everything at them, Nira and Una need a strategy. Una's history and accomplishments really won't cut it, since it's really all about the lying, not about her record. Nira sets up shop on the Enterprise in Una's old quarters, and in drops La'an, who asks if just maybe some of the evidence against Una was obtained illegally, and that could get her case thrown out. Maybe? No reason, just asking. And that leads La'an at first to inquire with Uhura if she could bring up all of Una's logs and communications. No. Meanwhile, Captain Pike gets a pep talk from Captain Battelle that goes something like, keep your mouth shut. And Spock is confronted by an old family friend, Captain Pasalk, who just happens to be working for the prosecution. It's a warm and fuzzy Vulcan greeting, which means that it's seething with resentment and disdain. The tribunal begins. The charges are read, and both sides give their opening statements, the law versus the lie, and partly on trial here whether the law itself is just. Robert April is first on the stand, reluctantly admitting that he would not have sponsored Una's application to Starfleet if he had known the truth. When he's cross-examined, you better believe Nira throws a lot of Prime Directive violations from April's past into the court record, making that point that Starfleet officers bend or break rules literally all the time. That doesn't play well in front of a Starfleet tribunal, and the entire testimony is stricken from the record. That leads Una to confront Nira about her tactic, which patently embarrasses the Federation, but Nira just moves on to continue her work. Next, a bunch of Una's Enterprise crewmates take the stand, and naturally they are full of praise for their friend. Oh, wait, there is the matter of La'an Noonien Singh, related to one particularly famous genetically augmented historic figure. Who could that be? That brings us to a private late-night conversation in which La'an tells Nira she's no closer to finding out who leaked Una's communications, but there are those who suspect La'an herself. Why? Because at one point, La'an was angry about Una's secret and recorded it in a personal log. That was a personal thing, though. She was hurt, feeling that she had been lied to, but Nira assures her that the leak was not her fault. The real culprit? Well, maybe La'an should put some of her investigative skills back to work. Now it's time for Una herself to take the stand. She answers truthfully about everything, especially her desire to be in Starfleet, to overcome her own hardships by heading to the stars. And those hardships go right back to her childhood, keeping Illyrian traditions alive, only in the shadows, seeing a child and his family arrested for being augments. In another incident, Una nearly died from an injury if her family hadn't found a sympathetic underground doctor to treat her. Eventually, as the city was split into Illyrian and non-Illyrian, Una's family could pass, and they left for the non-Illyrian side of things. And now we know the rift between her and Nira. But then she wanted to join Starfleet, to go to the stars with people from a myriad of backgrounds, and eventually the weight of living a lie became too much. Una leaked her own personal logs because she wanted to live authentically and safely among her crew, and she felt that Starfleet's ideals, her belief in those ideals, would welcome her. It is moving testimony, but remember Spock's nemesis, Pasalk? He gets up to question Una about the date Captain Pike knew the truth about her, and she answers that it was a full 4 months before her arrest. Therefore, Captain Pike is now implicit in a case of conspiracy. This Vulcan is playing hardline with logic. Regardless of emotion, Una lied and now has dragged a great officer into the firing line of a court-martial. Nira's got just one more thing, though, a page right out of the Starfleet Code. It has to do with people fleeing persecution and Starfleet's role in providing asylum, and a captain's exercise of discretion when doing so. Nira points out that upholding this rule absolves Una and Pike, and it upholds the very ideal of the law. The tribunal is convinced. While they won't upend this policy against augments just yet, they can look at the circumstance of Una as an individual and indeed grant her asylum. Nira 1, Batel and Pasalk 0. The Enterprise crew and their first officer are back on board, and with that score and the reconciliation with Una, it's Nira out to a round of applause. With a full crew and a hug for Una from Captain Pike, it's back to work. The end.
Bravo. That was.
Thank you.
I was reliving the episode as you read it.
Well, thank you. I had to have a little bit of fun with it, but there was fun stuff.
That's an intimidating episode to write a recap for. So props to you and everyone out there who had to take on the job of doing that.
Yeah. Wow. A lot happening there. And look, I don't want to spoil my thoughts. I will say that every season of the new Trek that has come since Discovery started in 2017, there are episodes that just kind of rise to the top. And I think, ooh, that'll be a great one to talk about 9 years from now on Mission Log when we do another deep dive. And this is one that I just kept thinking, wow, do I write all those notes now or do I save them for 2032?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yes, all of the above. Yeah.
I have envy, and I can't wait for that episode of Mission Log. Even though I'm going to be waiting some time, I'm excited for it.
Well, maybe Norm and I can record it now. We'll get you a preview copy, and then we'll just put it for a release date. September 2032. Whenever.
I finally get screeners! Yay!
Yes. There you go. All right. Well, speaking of our own tribunal here on Mission Log, let us go to regular caller, friend of the show, and that would be Chris. Cannot wait to hear what you have to say. Chris, welcome.
Hey, good to see you, John. Good to see you, Heather. Wonderful to see you again. It was a great one. I think we're going to hear it a lot tonight, but it was a great one. I'm going to steal one of your lines, John. It was a grab you by the shirt collar kind of week. And it's
Yes.
just, oh my goodness, I think easily top three like new Star Treks of like Paramount Plus era streaming Star Treks. But
Yeah.
yeah, just so much stuff. I mean, in particular, I really liked the scene between Mira and La'an, and she has this line like, "You are not born a monster. You are only born with the capacity for actions to do good or bad." And I was like, that's the thesis right there. Is like, that's it. But yes, it's wonderful episode. Wonderful episode.
I have the whole quote if you'd like to hear it.
Yes,
oh, I'd love
please.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a really long quote. Are you sure? All
do
right,
it. Lay it on. I just
on.
talked a lot, so
Okay,
do it.
and I there's a ... here. Could it be that you carry your family's augmentations and you believe that because of them you may become dangerous? There's nothing wrong with you, Lieutenant. No hidden monster inside. It's how they make us feel. They look down at us for so long that we begin to look down on ourselves. Genetics is not destiny, despite what you may have been taught. The fear you have of yourself is not your own. It was drilled into you. You're not born a monster. You were just born with the capacity for actions, good or ill, just like the rest of us.
That's so good. And I love that point about saying it's not you, it's how they make you feel. It is 100% about those reactions. And obviously, there are so many real world parallels that you or I and anybody who calls into this show tonight, and in the many essays and comments that could be made about this, that you can parallel to current topics.
Yes.
But at the same time, on the micro level, this is so much about anybody who has felt put upon, bullied, marginalized, made to feel less than, that I love the sentiment of that speech so much. There are so many points watching this episode that I just felt like a little choked up, like, oh my God, this is, Chris, you said it, and I have to give a little credit. I think it was Women at Warp or somebody from their crew or somebody that we were having a discussion about Star Trek, tipping over from commentary to advocacy. And you can't do it often. You go back to the original series, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. To me, this is this series, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, in a really profound, great way that really speaks to the 21st century, the way that hopefully that show spoke to the audience in 1967, 68. Sorry if I got the date wrong. But I love that when you can reach through the TV screen, grab the collar and say, no, listen, this is what this is about. And I wonder, okay, so the three of us and presumably other people who will call into the show might have a similar reaction to it. But I wonder, and I pose it to the two of you, and I'll pose it to others who call in. Since Discovery premiered, there has been negative pushback about Star Trek being too socially conscious, too into this, like cramming this message down the audience's throat. I don't agree with it, but that is an argument that some people make, I think disingenuously very often. But then this episode comes along and says, no. Now you thought that was something we were doing. Now we're really going to do it. Do you think this is it Star Trek doubling down? Is it just like this is the natural progression because of course we get an episode like this? What do you think goes into it?
I think definitely, like, you do, like, every Star Trek gets one of these, and but I also think this is the one you get because it feels right. Like, if you're going to swing the pendulum all the way, this is the one you do it on because the story beats say you should, because this is what Una's story is. It's literally about persecution. It's literally about prejudice. And whereas I think some people, they criticize, they would say it was maybe forced, like the other episodes are maybe forced into a story that didn't need it. This, you need it. This story doesn't work if you don't confront kind of the reality that is at the heart of it, is that, like she says, sort of the other theme of the episode, is a law worth it if the law is unjust? And so I think, yes, it is you do get it because that is the world we live in, but also this episode earns it and totally deserves it, if that makes sense.
Yep. Our very own Earl in the Earl Green Room just commented, it's Star Trek saying, okay, one more time, louder for you people in the back.
And I think it does that in a way that is not so. The only time that I really see any validation at all for saying that Star Trek has been too woke or too liberal or whatever was including Stacey Abrams, who I love and am a fan and supporter of. That's not to say like we haven't had appearances by people throughout Star Trek, but I think that was a very forward move, and that move especially it triggered Ted Cruz. So it absolutely triggered that base. I wish that instead of saying that they're shoving this down our throats, I wish people would say that this makes me uncomfortable, and then let's have a conversation about why. I don't think that this episode goes too far. I think that this episode is actually a little bonk on the head. Not so much. I mean, it's not doing that in the writing. The writing is exceptional. This episode, I will note very quickly, was largely produced by women, directed by women, written by women. Too many words in my mouth. Incredible performances by our actresses, tons of women behind the scenes, and I'm just blown away by the heart that is here, because I was trying to ask myself, is this an episode that I would use to introduce someone to Star Trek? I feel like there is enough there that is the meat of what Star Trek stands for, that anybody would get those messages and come away from this episode understanding what Star Trek is, what Star Trek aims to be, without knowing everything about, because, even with Una, we didn't know about Una. So this is new to us as well. And we don't know a lot about Illyrians. And so my wish is that sometime in the future, we do a deep dive into, are Illyrians really a danger?
Yeah.
Well, why are they, that's a whole big conversation, I'm sure. It's very large for Mission Log Live.
And by the way, just to back you up and all of us up, Jane in the chat says Mission Log Live, the meatiest. And I don't think she's wrong. Chris, we've got a few people waiting to chat with us. So any final thought?
Yeah, I'll just say I'd love a Nero spinoff, honestly. Like big Daredevil, like when Daredevil got to do the courtroom scenes, I think that was when Daredevil was at its strongest. And this was just fantastic. I really like that actress. I liked her like 1920s jazz club smoky voice.
Yes.
Everything about her is wonderful. So please bring her back. She's very wonderful.
Kanaya Yatide Badaki is her name.
There we go.
And she was phenomenal.
Right. Said it better than I could. Yeah, Nira, space lawyer, coming soon to a streaming platform other than Paramount Plus. All right, Chris, thank you so much, my friend. We'll see you next time.
All right, see ya. Bye.
All right, be good. Hey, we've got Brandon, who's been waiting patiently. Brandon, good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Good to see you too. Good to see you, Heather.
Hi.
I loved this episode. I mean, I actually loved at the end of it. My wife turned to me and she said, "Wow." And then there was just that just sort of hung there for like 30 seconds. And then because I can't be quiet for very long, we started talking about it. But this was a level of boldness. This was a level of really being just like what you're talking about, that I don't just love it in Star Trek, I crave it. And I think you guys were talking about like how it gets presented. And yet I think there are a lot of people who are very disingenuous. Oh, I don't like how the messaging was presented. But I did sometimes feel with Discovery and Picard like I was getting slapped with it. And I was like, oh my God, not the face. I agree with you. Yeah. But this just was such a beautiful telling, and it was so applicable. I mean, my wife and I just, after the episode, she's like, well, I mean, it was applicable to this group of people throughout history and this group of people today and this group. We were just kept coming up with more and more and more people, as it's this look at the past and at the present and a dire warning about the future and how we need to be better.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I could talk to you guys for like 6 hours about it. But I think the one thing that I would really love to zoom in on that really caught me was, well, I mean, the whole episode, but the one that I'll talk about this time was Uhura's scene with La'an. Because the other messaging around this, there's a lot there, but Uhura's scene with La'an had a great just sort of sub message where it's like you're fighting the good fight, but it is so easy in the face of injustice to want to use injustice to fight it. Your heart is in the right place. You want to do the right thing, but you can't fight the fruit of the poisonous tree with the fruit from another poisonous tree.
Well said.
Man.
Bravo.
That's beautiful. See, I'll get choked up just hearing you say that because everything in this episode is about the ideals that we hope for ourselves, that we hope that we are enacting and truly living. And we see time after time how we fall short of that. But it takes a show like this to, again, grab you by the collar and say, no. You can actually be better. You can actually act better and work for better outcomes for all people. And even in this episode, even in the context of the episode, it may not be the perfect ending, but it is the step forward that they need. And I want to come back to this. I hope that this isn't just dropped and we never hear from it again. I hope that there's more to come. And if we get more of Space Lawyer, then I'm down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brandon, any other thoughts before we go to our next caller?
The one thing that I wanted to I'm not going to dive into it, but that I thought was very interesting, that phrase, that is the episode's title, appears in a ton of different orders and terminologies that get shuffled around to mean the same thing. And I had always heard it as per ardua ad astra, through struggle to the stars. And I thought it was very interesting that in this one, the stars come first. Yeah. And the struggle is just how you get there.
Yes. I'd always heard it translated as to the stars despite adversity. And I think there are a lot of ways you can translate, but I think the meaning absolutely comes clear. But I love that is the goal. We have our eyes there no matter what. And it was just beautiful to hear Una describe that in the episode. Yeah. Brandon, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.
Great to hear from you. Till next time. And hey, how about before we go to the break, we say hello to our friend, Paul. I'm not going to say which Paul. You'll have to figure it out if you're watching from home.
It's such a mystery. It's such a mystery which Paul it's going to be on Monday night.
How are you, man?
Well, why do I feel like I've just been hit by a shuttle?
Because you've been drinking? I don't know. Tell us.
No, it's because I've watched this episode twice, and I've watched this Utide Badeki give an Emmy worthy. I just have not seen an actor walk in and mop up the floor with everybody else, and they're all really good. The presence, the material, it made me feel like I was back at Trekfest in Iowa. It was just such a live experience, which Trekfest in Iowa is what you do on the weekends in June, because where else to go? But I just cannot thank the women involved, Valerie Weiss and Rebecca Romaine and Utide just have laid out a message in a way that if you don't get this, you're just an idiot. I mean, it is so amazing to watch somebody, particularly, the Vulcan who came in at the end and just, was going to rule, and she just took him and mopped the floor with him too. It was amazing. I can't say anything more than that. You took my one on genetics is not destiny, so that was one of my points. But I have one more here about how they just had this subtle subterfuge. How you thought La'an was going to be involved with this, and not really. So, what I want to leave you with before you go to the commercial is okay. I'm old enough to have watched Spock's trial. And then shortly after we were married, we got to watch A Measure of a Man.
Mhm.
And now, in this part of my life, I get to watch this. And I just wonder what your thoughts are and how important this will be in 20 years. I think this is equally as important, if not more so, than The Measure of a Man and Trek lore. And I can't say enough good things about this episode. So
Go to it. Yeah, go to it, Heather. I want to hear your thoughts on that question.
I genuinely hope that we talk about how outdated this episode is and we've moved so far forward that we don't need it anymore. But I think this will stand out across time as one of the best episodes of Star Trek. And I think that at the end of the day, I don't know that these issues are going to go away. And so I think that the more frequently we have these conversations, the better. And if it's there to help foster a conversation 20 years from now, 40 years from now, 200 years from now, I'm grateful. I hope we don't have to have those conversations. But I think this is a pretty good blueprint for reminding us of our potential and what we can do when we look at each other as equals.
Maybe, just maybe, it will look as dated as Let That Be Our Last Battlefield in 50 years.
There we go.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it?
It would be nice.
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, John.
I was going to say that I think you really hit the nail on the head, that I have a note somewhere. By the way, this is my favorite kind of show where I took a ton of notes. I think Heather took a ton of notes, and we will barely get to 1% of them because these calls are so good and so provocative on such a good episode. But I wrote somewhere in my notes that Star Trek gets to do this with its format every now and then. I've always said, okay, you can use Star Trek and you get to do a Western, or you get to do a romance, or you get to do something else. And you can play in this giant Gene Roddenberry sandbox and tell these different types of stories. And every now and then, Star Trek gets to do a courtroom drama, but almost every time they completely knock it out of the park. And I think about all the freaking Mirror Universe episodes that I've waded through in the years and years and years of doing Star Trek commentary. And, it's like, okay, you get through that. But then if I've got like 5 great trial dramas that really say something that just really stand out at the end of that, I will take those anytime and rewatch those anytime, because they are so powerful and just get to the heart of Star Trek's message.
Speaking of the Star Trek message and mission log, I'm going to lead you into your ad, and thank you for the Patreon membership, which is as low as $1 a month, because you get to meet people like your next caller.
Yes,
and then you want to meet them in person, so you do indeed hop in your car and drive to Riverside, Iowa, to meet your friend from Des Moines. And you get to meet each other for the first time. So I'd love to hear you two talk about the Patreon and what it brings you, and Discord, which then brings you into Kon-Tiki and discussions about all sorts of other shows and just some great things. And we'll leave you with that. And it's always great to see you two. So have a great night.
Take care, Paul, master of the segue. I thought that was Norm's job, but Paul just nailed it. Wow, Heather, patreon.com/missionlog. That gets you into our Patreon community, more importantly, into the Discord community. And I tease it at the top of the show. You have taken it and run with it. You've been doing a rewatch of Strange New Worlds that led us right up to the premiere of season 2. And now that season 2 is on, tell everybody what you're doing.
So I'm getting together with all these amazing, awesome, cool people that I love very much. And we just talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Look, this show went for about an hour and a half last week. I was up for at least 2 more hours, just like, oh my God, I need to talk about more Star Trek. And it's really just that for me with Picard, since I was in the chat for Picard, I was like, I want to talk about it more. So since I have the opportunity to do that with Strange New Worlds, I said, let's do it. We have a great group of people with so many different perspectives. Some people love it. Some people, nobody hates it. But we talk about all those likes and dislikes. And by the end of the episode, much with we watched the Orville on Discord. We have After Dark where we're watching Voyager. After we've got Babylon 5, we've got Twilight Zone, we've got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
After watching and sharing these episodes and listening to the varied perspectives that our patrons bring, my perspective is often changed and always embellished. There is, gosh, especially last week, I think, or the week before, such an opportunity to connect with personal stories from one another.
Yes.
And those things, that's the reason why Paul goes and drives to Trek Fest to meet Alan, and Heather sits here in South Florida crying. Okay, I didn't cry, but I was very envious that my friends were getting together, and I because I want to meet Alan someday, and I hope that will happen. And Strange New Worlds is every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, which makes it 6 p.m. Pacific, and right there on our Discord, super easy to find. So much else going on Discord. I can't even. Please come and join us. Seriously, my favorite people. Yeah. Is that good enough? Do you think people
I think that's great.
Now?
I think it's great. Look, Jane said it in the chat. You will love Discord, and if Jane says it, I mean, look, she's not wrong. You're not going to argue with Jane, are you?
No, I will not.
Just one of the fabulous people who is part of our community there. Patreon.com/missionlog. That gets you in the door, and then you get a private invitation link to our Discord. And for anybody who hasn't done that before, there's a ton of text threads, which are a lot of fun. Just kind of go pop in and leave messages and conversations there. But these live chats are like this, but unlike this, they're not really hosted. Everybody's on live all at once, and we just get to have this huge conversation. Very often funny, sometimes very topical, sometimes very personal, and we really have gotten to know each other there. And I love it. Like you, I look forward to it every week. Can't wait for what this week brings. And there's a little something for everyone. Topical episode discussion, Kon-Tiki about conventions, like you said, Twilight Zone, Babylon 5 chat, all kinds of stuff. So join us, patreon.com/missionlog. We will see you there. Okay.
You will be assimilated.
You will.
In the best way.
In the best way. It's like a friendly kind of assimilation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go right over to the guy who got the memo about the T-shirt. That's Alan. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Yes, John, Heather, so good to see you. And yes, the Mission Log Patreon, where we're Girardi Borg. We're not you're not
that other kind of Borg.
No, we're the good kind. It's completely all right.
Yeah.
You will be welcome.
How was I have to assume, knowing you and knowing Paul, getting together must have been great. How was Trek? Yeah.
It was unbelievable. I've been talking up Trek Fest for a while. Oh, hold on a second. I gotta
Yes. Yeah, okay, there you go. Take a big slug of that. Yeah. Very good.
Delicious. But yeah, it was everything you'd hope for your small town of I think we heard 1,100 people who do a Star Trek themed town festival every year. It was amazing. The parade, the costume contest, the model show, which he was a bit apparently too modest to mention, but Mr. Harvith came in second place in the sci-fi division.
Of course he did. Of course he did. Brilliant. Bravo, Paul.
And yes. You get to have some really cool up close conversations with people like Chase Masterson and Lolita Fajo, John Paragon, who does a lot of the makeup for things like conventions and some of the projects that the Star Trek folks have been associated with. So yeah, it's a great time. And amazing. Heather, you're on the invite list. You can come whenever you feel like.
Awesome. Thank you.
Very cool.
So yeah, there's actually, we were like, this was fun, but we got to get more people here next time.
Yeah.
So, and
Mission
All right.
log
and
field
John,
trip.
Yeah.
and John, the one thing that I regret is I did not get a chance to say hi in person to, was it Todd from the podcast? The guy who came out from Alabama or Mississippi or wherever he's from.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of who that is who came up there.
Yeah. He was
yeah.
the
And
MC guy.
Yes. And in our well, next time. This is the goal for next year then.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, that is awesome, man. And I'm glad you got to hang out. Glad you got the t-shirt to prove it all. So but tell us about Ad Astra. What are we thinking about tonight's episode?
what are we thinking about indeed?
Yes.
Just, it's always nice when there's a what is it, a target rich environment crops up for Star Trek. I do want to sort of continue on from a point, Heather, that you were just making about the applicability of this episode, because one of the criticisms that I have seen pop up, and it's a little despairing and a little disheartening, is I've seen some posts and some in some places saying things like, well, but they did Bashir having the same problems in Deep Space Nine, so blah blah blah. Is it really worth it? What's the problem? And first of all, it's not exactly Star Trek's fault that we still have to have this conversation.
Right. Very true.
But every I think this shows a good first step. And if I may go on a little bit of a tangent, something that we've discussed a little bit on the Discord that isn't necessarily Star Trek related is all of our love of the Defunct Land podcast.
Yes.
And
yes, of course.
Yeah, in its many episodes. And one of the ones that they did was on the Disneyland teen dance club from the 80s, Videopolis. And in that, I learned that there's a certain timeline for that relates to dancing at Disneyland. And from practically the start of Disneyland through the early 80s, same-sex dancing was prohibited altogether at Disneyland. However, in 1981, I think, two men were dancing together and were escorted out of Disneyland, wound up suing, and they won their case, but in a weird sort of ruling, it was decided that this ruling applied specifically to those two men. So much like what has happened with Una here in this episode, that in this one particular case, everything's we're wrong, but everything's cool. Flash forward to a couple of years later, and they drop the requirement altogether, because when they opened the dance club, they're like, well, sometimes kids are more comfortable dancing with their friends, and it takes some of the social pressure off if you've just got a group of people, and who's really dancing with who, can we really say? And then flash forward to 2023, and a couple of weeks ago they had an official Pride Night. So progress. That's progress.
I just came back from Pride Month at Disney, and I got a very spiffy little Happy Pride water bottle.
Hey, you got a show and tell too. That's great.
Yeah, great stuff. And we've lost it in the chat, but I did go back and write a note that Carlos mentioned Jessie Gender's reaction to this episode, and I bring it up because I have not seen if she did a video about this. We've had Jessie as a guest before. I highly recommend go on Twitter, I say Twitter, but any social media, and go look for the stories, like go look for the reactions from people in marginalized communities. Like we said, this episode can really apply to everyone, but again, I have seen a lot of conversation in the trans community about how special and important this episode is. And I think that it's so valuable for us to take the initiative to go seek those other perspectives and really understand how, again, it's not just Jesse's. There are many perspectives out there, and we should seek them all, because this episode did speak to many people, and there's a lot of value in the knowledge that they're sharing about their experiences.
Great idea. Yes, I'll definitely have to add Jessie's video to my playlist, because she is awesome, and I'm sure had a lot to say about this. And Alan, thank you for bringing that up, because that is such an interesting, obscure, real life parallel that I would not have known about. But I think it does speak to what we can look at as it is a happy ending in the respect that we get our crew person back, that Una's back on the Enterprise, that she wins for the day. But what does it say about all the other people in her position or a similar position who still need to be recognized? And you can look at that as a real downside of this decision, but then what you hope happens is that one brick that has been knocked out of this particular wall is enough to start the crumbling of the rest of that wall. When you normalize at least for one person, then the next one that comes along and the next one after that, it has just become normalized enough for everybody else to go, oh, okay, wait, we did this. The world didn't end. Hopefully those prejudices start to crumble as well. And it makes it that much easier for the next one, until, like you said, well, in that case, 40 years, but I think even faster than that, where our acceptance of same-sex dancing together at a nightclub or, a band playing, we don't even think twice about it. Or at least I hope we don't think nobody in this room thinks twice about it.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Well, Alan, I'm going to ask you if you got one final thought, because we got 3 more callers to get to, and I cannot wait to hear from them as well.
Absolutely.
But I want to hear if you got a final thought to leave us with.
I do have one final thought, and it's lovely that Star Trek is so fond of Latin. And so I'll leave you with these 2 words, serva prodigio.
Which means?
Save prodigy.
Yes. I love it.
There we go. Well done. Bravo. All right. Let's get that out there. Let's get that trending too.
We'll
Latin.
see you next week, and next week.
Yes. All right. See you then,
love
my
it.
friend. Bye. Take care. All right, let's jump right into it with John Arminio. John, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great.
Good.
We've had some amazing calls, so I just want to thank everybody for the wonderful conversation they've already brought to the table.
Week after week, I'm always impressed with the quality of people who call in and the quality of ideas that get discussed. So that's, we're lucky. We have this amazing audience, and you're a part of it. So thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. What's up?
All right. So first, most importantly, the Strange New World design of the dress uniforms is just on fire. Anyway,
but I feel I love the uniforms, but the epaulets are just a little too big. Just scale those back 10%. That's all I ask. Okay. That's it. All
just stand further away, John.
Okay, that's it. That's all I need to do.
Yeah. So for me, I was really taken by the asylum angle that the episode took. Because for me, I really think that is sort of like, maybe Star Trek doesn't like me using this language, but like a sacred duty. If you're in a position to give shelter and succor to somebody in need, people fleeing from oppression, it's your job. Like, you have to help those people. And just recently we've seen hundreds of people seeking asylum or at least a new home drown in the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
And we consistently see governments shirk that responsibility. So even if legal arguments from all logic point to it's your job to take in the tired, poor, and huddled masses, we run away from that responsibility in real life. So, as inspiring as this episode is, I have to think that if these legal arguments were made in a 21st century courtroom, they would be rejected. Because, we've seen all sorts of crazy, illogical decisions made by our own Supreme Court. And so that's part of what I think Star Trek is necessary, because I think it can really show us the way to at least start the conversation to say we have to help people who are victims of oppression, even if it's our own systemic oppression, and we have to recognize what we have done to marginalized groups so we can then be better.
Well said. There was a quote in here, right when we're meeting Una, where they're about to leave with the counselor. She's like, how can he counsel me when he works for you? And I thought that was such a strong statement about the legal system in general. And leads into this, because a lot of the people representing those people seeking asylum are not always the right people to do that job. And again, that's just another community that this episode speaks for, in my opinion. That was really great observation.
Yeah, I mean, if you hear accounts of immigration and asylum courts, they're doing dozens and dozens of cases a day. A person seeking it who has traveled for months across hazardous terrain from people who are trying to kill them, they get 5 minutes in front of a judge to plead their case in a language that they don't speak very well.
Yes.
So it's, Una has, an elite level civil rights lawyer on her side, the crew of the Enterprise on her side, and that's the only way she was able to get the asylum for this one specific case. But thousands upon thousands of people seeking asylum around the world don't get that. And so I'm glad that this episode ended with this was a narrow decision and it's a start. And so I appreciate that aspect.
Absolutely.
As well.
And I did appreciate that they also pointed out Una's privilege throughout this. I thought that was important as well.
I think, John, you're making an excellent point about the reality of the injustices of our justice system. And I hope that what this episode does is it speaks to something that we can very clearly understand when that doesn't work in the real world, in this complex bureaucracy. But what you said earlier speaks to something that is very fundamentally humanistic, which is, on the one side, you have this the learned trait of prejudice towards someone or toward a class or a group, versus the innate understanding that we have to help people who need help.
Yeah.
And these two things are at odds the more and more complex the system gets. And in this case here, in this fiction, we have the human, well, represented also by a Tellarite and a Vulcan. We have the human tendency to then step back and say, what's actually more important here? What's more important? What trumps everything else? What the default position should be? We help the person now who needs help. The other thing is up for debate. And they made a good case to say, hey, we came from the eugenics wars, millions of people die, blah, blah, blah. This is why these things are here. We're not going to solve that right away. And they're right. And what we're all hoping here in the audience, and that show being representative of what our ideals are, what we're hoping is that conversation actually doesn't stop when in this case, the cameras are off, or in universe, they walk out of that room and they actually try to parse how to make those things compatible. So I'm glad you presented it in the way that you did. And that is excellent food for thought. Thank you.
Yeah, great comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And John, we're going to say goodbye, just so, unless you got a final thought here, we'll jump over to our last two callers in a moment.
Just that, I think Star Trek is one of those franchises that excels at reevaluating its own morality. So especially that's why I love Star Trek 6 so much, that it's looking back on itself and trying to grow from where it came from. And so that's another reason to love this episode.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, thank you, my friend. We'll see you again soon, I hope. By the way, in the chat, our very own Norman Lau with the hashtag save Star Trek and save Star Trek Prodigy, of course. And then Scott Palm, we need Star Trek. Yes, we do, for many, many reasons. So thank you. And Norman saying goodnight to everyone. He's got rabbits demanding his attention, so he needs to.
Bye, Norm.
Bye, Norm. All right, well, Norm, just for you, and you can listen to the replay later. We're going to talk to our next to last guest, our penultimate caller, Cherie. And then I believe Sam is still standing by. So, Cherie, good to see you. And what is on your mind tonight?
Oh, well, I just loved this episode, so most of this is just going to be me gushing about how much I loved the episode.
You're sitting in front of my favorite scene, and I showed it to my mom last night. She hasn't watched any Strange New Worlds, but definitely knows Star Trek, introduced me to Star Trek. And it was just like, look, here's all the context you need, blah, blah, blah. They're sitting in the mess hall. Boom. Spock's reaction, gold. Laugh out loud, gold. Yes.
Yeah, I felt like a good response to my complaint that Spock's been too emotional. I did like that was a good Vulcan.
Yes, he was great.
So I really enjoyed this episode, and I actually hadn't expected to, because not that I have anything against Una, but I felt like, well, we know she's coming back, so I didn't really feel like I was going to be surprised by anything they did. Like, I was like, they'll do something. They'll do something. She'll come back. I did feel like I wasn't sure if they'd be able to hold my attention, because I knew what the outcome was going to be, but they managed to do a great episode, because it didn't matter what the outcome was.
Exactly.
It's just a really great episode. And I really loved the metaphor and that her lawyer was Black, because as someone who is mixed race, I am very familiar with the idea of passing. And that was what flashed to me. That was really interesting to me, because I actually did watch Jesse's video afterwards, and I hadn't even thought of how it relates to the LGBT community, because the first thing for me was my own personal experiences. I'm mixed race, and I have passed at different points in my life, not on purpose, but it's just, it comes with the territory if people can't tell. So I can relate to Una's journey and sort of the guilt, kind of retroactive guilt, when I look back at certain things in my life and I'm like, oh, I got that because I look white. Not for any other reason. So I really loved that, and I really loved that the message of the show wasn't just like tied up in a little bow and it was like everything is perfect at the end. It was like, no, this is just a step. This is a step. And I love that they did that, because I feel like too many episodes of just TV in general, not just Star Trek, but just TV in general, is just like, we fixed everything just at the end of the episode. And I'm like, that's not how the real world works. So I loved that they didn't say that. It's like, still you get the feel good feeling, but you acknowledge that like everything is not fixed.
What else? I'm curious.
I did think it was kind of hilarious though that when, like, in the context of the episode, yes, Uhura protecting the personal logs, good. Obviously, that's what you need to do. In the context of Star Trek as a whole, when have personal logs ever been private? There are so many episodes where people just like I can just off the top of my head, like in Discovery, when she's like, "Oh, could I just access my brother's personal logs?" Sure, we don't know what kind of relationship. You haven't talked to your brother in years, but sure, of course. And then
I immediately, even just watching the episode and taking notes, I was flashing back to scenes in like DS9 and TNG where a captain or somebody walks into somebody's quarters, the person isn't there, and then they say, "Computer, play personal logs." Like, what? Yeah.
I just
I
feel
like
a lot of that going on.
After this, I feel like Uhura's personal logs are probably just like a little diary with a lock on them and being like, "I don't trust any of you."
Oh, that's actually adorable. Yeah.
I like in the chat, Mark is saying "preach it, sure," and I totally preach it 100%.
Yes.
And I just also I was joking with my boyfriend that actually Uhura is the only security for all of Starfleet for the personal logs, and that's why in the future, once she's gone, like people can just access people's personal logs, because there's not a computer security. You literally have to ask Uhura. And if Uhura says yes, you can access the personal logs. But if she says no, you can't. But once Uhura's gone, anyone can access personal logs forever.
That's it. That answers it all. Perfect. I love it. Look, we're at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, depending on where you are. We got one more call to get in because I want to hear from Sam. Any final thought here before we say goodnight?
I just love this episode so much, and actually it made me also think of I was listening to Women at Warp as well, and when they were talking about Strange New Worlds, one of them called it Safe New Worlds, and sometimes I do get that vibe from it. I like it a lot, but there is that vibe sometimes. But I loved the fact that this episode was not that, and I really appreciated it.
100%. Awesome. Thank you so much for calling in, and I hope we get to see you again soon. All right.
Love you too, Heather.
Good night. All right. Bye. Wrapping up the show tonight is Sam. Sam, usually right in the middle of our live chats and After Dark, but tonight wrapping it all up for us. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you guys. Good.
Yeah. Well, what is on your mind tonight?
Yeah, so I just had a chance to watch this episode like right before this, and I had to call in because wow.
So I hope that means you'll join Heather's chat tomorrow night in Discord if you're free.
Or I will try.
Sorry, yes. Wednesday night.
Yes,
that's
I will try. Yes. Yeah. Because there's obviously a lot of there was a direct analogy to all the persecuted people. I mean, they mentioned it by name, right?
Yeah.
And but I want to go to the literal thing on trial was genetic modification. Because that is a buzzword, GMO, that gets thrown around a lot today. And, like was said in the episode, it's a tool. It's not the tool itself. It's the application of the tool, right?
Yes.
And we benefit from GMOs and genetic modification all day, every day. So we've never had a problem with it in the past. We decided to do agriculture. We decided we made all the vegetables and fruits the least bitter, the most nutritious, the most crop yielding, and it has fed the world. You can't just let that go.
Yeah, 10,000 years ago, we made a banana you could actually eat instead of a long grassy thing that would kill you. Yes.
Right. So you can't say genetic modification bad. That doesn't make any sense, right? So I understand that was all selective breeding. So it was an outside in versus a direct inside out, literally changing the genes. But the idea is the same. Just the fact that we can do it more accurately now, and we're only going to get better, can only save us more if it's used for those purposes. So what I love about this episode is it's trying to say that the other half of this that I want to just mention also is General Order 1 and its application, because they even mentioned that it's coming up on being called the Prime Directive.
Right.
And I like the word directive because it's not a law. It's not an absolute black and white. It is think before you act, and think of it in these ways. So it's, and I love that they put the admiral on there and said, hey, all those times that you decided because you thought it was the right thing to do, but when you made those decisions, you made it with the idea, like, yes, we don't want to interfere with a native evolution, but if it's outweighed by saving them, we will choose to save them, or we will choose to save our friend, or all the number of times they've done it in Star Trek. It's not an absolute thing. And that is what's so good. And that's what they're saying in this episode, is that genetic modification isn't an absolutism. And I love that she was able to say, look at the diversity of Star Trek. Why can't I be included? Yes. What an interesting thing to say directly to Star Trek. I think John mentioned it earlier. It's Star Trek discussing Star Trek.
Yeah.
Because they've always had this thing, and it's even in the prosecution, she says, we can't do this. It goes against natural evolution. We're playing God. Like, no, we've invented medicine. We extend life. And I don't understand the idea that you can't do that to one species artificially over naturally. Like, why does naturally have to be the course? Why does evolution have to be selected naturally? We don't do that in our society. So when I see a Vulcan that's super strong and lives 200 years, why can't a human? Why can't we make that happen for a human? Because it naturally happened for a Vulcan, they get to have it, but it didn't naturally happen to a human, so we don't get to have it. I don't understand that line, that drawing that line in the sand. So I love that that she brought up the connectedness to the Prime Directive, because yes, we don't want to interfere with natural selection or natural evolution of a society or a person if they don't consent to it, or if we think that it might hurt them, and we want to consider that harm before interfering. But we can also consider the benefit that could happen. And if that outweighs the harm, then we can decide to break that rule and say, this is a case. But the rule exists to force you to think before you act.
Yes. 100% preach on. I love it.
So,
man.
Always came out of the episode. I had to come on.
I love it. I love that. That's why we love having our chats with you on Thursday afternoons, and that's why I'm so glad you called into the show tonight. Man, imagine you just watching it right before this. You got to get it off your chest. I love that. All right, man. By the way, you're coming to Vegas, right?
Yes.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait to get to do all of this in person. And anybody who's listening tonight or later when this goes out on the podcast stream, make sure you let us know if you're going to be in Vegas, because a lot of stuff happening for our Patreon supporters and just in general at the Roddenberry stage. So give us a shout. Okay. Sam, thank you so much for closing it out with that. Love it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Till next time, man. Be good. Heather, thank you. Thank you. A blast to do my first episode of Strange New Worlds with you for the season.
I will be up for another 3 hours for anyone who wants to talk about Star Trek.
Nice. Yeah, head over to Discord or wherever and see Heather there. All right. Well, with that, Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Technical production on Mission Log and Mission Log Live by the incongruent Earl Green. Be sure to visit podcast.roddenberry.com for the latest from Roddenberry Podcasts. If you would like to support Mission Log directly, give us a look at patreon.com/Mission Log. Thank you, Heather Barker, for getting us going with Strange New World Season 2. And next week, be sure to join Norman and Heather back with a recap and review of Strange New Worlds Episode 3. We look forward to seeing you next week.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.